Hello, class and Dr. Sanchez. I am pleased to be here and present my graduate research project titled Organizational Change and Apple Inc. Although many are likely familiar with the tech giant and its well-known products such as iPhone, MacBook, and iPad, sheer luck was not enough to propel it to the level of success it's had today. In fact, Apple has humble roots, beginning as a small computer company located in founder Steve Jobs' garage. However, swift and strategic organizational change, including a dynamic business plan combined with strong leadership, has enabled Apple to become a household name, one that is unlikely to disappear in the near future. Although many companies have risen to prominence throughout the years, not many have managed to stay on top so much as Apple Inc. Best known for, but not limited to, the iPhone, Apple has set the bar for technology, becoming the first publicly traded U.S. company to reach a $1 trillion valuation in August of this year, trillion with a T. Other services such as the App Store, Apple Pay, iTunes, and cloud streaming and storage services have all helped to boost this company to its current success. I hypothesize that Apple's success is due to purposeful change through innovative product development, an adaptive culture, and transformational leadership. During this presentation, we will focus on a variety of objectives, most notably Apple and its utilization of organizational change. First, we will discuss organizational change. What is it? A brief history, the levels which comprise it, and of course, how it is enacted and carried out. Next, we will focus on Apple's history and how it strategically used organizational change to gain success. Strategic use of innovative technology, adaptive culture, and transformative leadership will be discussed using scholarly sources. Then we will focus on implications for the 21st century, analyzing what can be learned from Apple's success. I will then provide recommendations for companies and their organizational change processes and complete the presentation with my references. Let's get started. Organizations change all the time. In fact, 95% of organization changes are evolutionary. These changes are gradual and consist of small, continuous adjustments that occur simultaneously across units. These ongoing accommodations and modifications are designed to improve the company over time without dramatic resistance or risk. In contrast, revolutionary change affects the deep structure of an organization, requiring changes from all levels of management and often ensures that the company will no longer be the same, commonly in terms of their mission or corporate culture. However, it should be noted that not all changes lead to improvement, nor are they all successful. So, why bother with changes at all? To start, some of the most common drivers behind organizational change include competition, changing needs of customers, and technological changes within or outside of the organization. Just as beings must change and adapt to meet their needs, so too must organizations. Although stagnancy is not an immediate kiss of death, without change, organizations are doomed to fail. Researchers Pascal, Millman, and Gioja warned that equilibrium is the precursor to death, meaning that organizations who remain comfortable and unwilling to be disturbed are unlikely to succeed. To counter this equilibrium, companies should ensure momentum is maintained, successors are chosen appropriately, and new initiatives are launched consistently and strategically. Although organizational change dates back to the records in the Old Testament, it has only recently begun to be studied in more depth. During the first decade of the 20th century, Frederick Winslow Taylor, often called the father of scientific management, listed 4 principles responsible for organizational success: data gathering, worker selection and development, integration of science and the trained worker, and redivision of the work of the business. Although he referred to workers as quote-unquote feeling animals, he believed data carefully collected and analyzed would produce long-lasting positive effects for companies. Some credit his way of thinking as the precursor to processes such as ISO 9000 and Six Sigma, both quality management processes implemented for improvement in a company. Contrary to Taylor, who focused on the engineering aspects of organizational change, the Hawthorne studies, led by researchers Roethlisberger, Whitehead, Mayo, and Holmans, focused on the human factors necessary for organizational success, such as morale and worker productivity. During the mid-20th century, survey feedback was introduced by Floyd Mann as a way to determine the best methods for organizational success. It allowed leaders to see the organization's strengths and weaknesses through the eyes of their employees, providing valuable information regarding any necessary changes. Organizational development emerged in the 1950s and focused on a methodological model of diagnosing the problem, obtaining feedback, and discussing potential solutions, and finally, taking action. It is also important to note that organizational development emphasizes all organizational members, making sure they are involved in and aware of any potential changes. A common form of change management today, management consulting, employs a strict problem-solving process in which data is first gathered, oftentimes in the form of employee surveys and interviews. Then, a hypothesis is generated explaining the company's potential solutions. Next, necessary actions are taken and results are verified through established milestones. Today, change management and organizational change typically involves a deep understanding of the behavioral sciences in conjunction with methodologies of the organizational change processes. Changes can occur based on three orders. First order change requires the focus to be on one subdivision of a company. During this order, changes are likely short-lived and will only have minimal impacts in areas outside of the designated subdivision. For example, a training designed for top management on how to speak more effectively would be considered a first-order change. In this way, the change is only a reinforcement of current understanding. Second-order changes mean that the target is beyond the initial focus, but will be affected by implementation of the first effort. Bartonek and Moch state that this type of change might be used to increase employee involvement in decision-making. First, interventions must be implemented to encourage employee participation. However, a schematic change of thought must also be fostered in top-level management, who might view employee involvement as unnecessary. The third and most difficult type of change is third order. This change will eventually influence organizational processes through the use of multiple factors. Oftentimes, it involves a series of events which lead to a higher order change in the company. For example, productivity. First, employees must be trained in how to better manage their time, while managers must be trained in how to better support their workers. This might lead to a change in group motivation, which in turn will lead to increased productivity. Although not immediate, correct implementation will lead to entire organizational system shifts. In order to implement any of these change orders, researchers typically refer to Kurt Lewin and his three-phase model for change, later expanded upon by Sheen in 1987, who pointed out that the phases are not in fact phases and therefore discrete, but instead overlap. In phase 1, we must unfreeze the system. This refers to creating a sense of urgency for the change, educating leaders on how to behave differently, and essentially shaking up the system so that it is accessible and amenable for changes. It also includes demonstrating the need for change to employees, introducing reasons for the change, and creation of psychological safety. In other words, employees should feel comfortable embracing the change and understand that all are doing it and it's for the good of the company. The second phase is movement, or allowing the organization to change through implementation of new policies or perhaps technology. However, it is important to remember that none of these changes will occur until an unfrozen condition is achieved. Once change is happening, leaders must make sure that it is working and still necessary, analyzing what they've learned from others' experiences and attending relevant conferences to learn more about the implemented change. The third and final phase is refreeze. This does not mean that the company abandons the change and remains stagnant once again. It is in fact the opposite. The change that has occurred cannot be forgotten or allowed to dissipate. In order to keep the change frozen within the company, reinforcement from leadership should be encouraged as well as its incorporation into the deep structure of the system. So just as important as shaking up the old system was, so too is ensuring the newly frozen system is prepared for the long haul. Now, one of the most successful companies in the world, Apple's rise to prominence is not due to accident or fate, but rather to purposeful change. With consumers' needs changing almost yearly and technology development growing at a rapid rate, Apple must adjust their products to meet the demand lest they be left behind. In 1976, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak built the Apple I in Jobs' garage, selling them without a monitor, keyboard, or casing. The Apple II was invented in 1977, springing into prominence due to its application VisiCalc, a spreadsheet software. By 1987, Apple had a real office complete with employees, and by 1980, Apple had released the Apple III, a business-focused computer that would compete with IBM and Microsoft. Apple next incorporated a graphical user interface, leading to the Apple Macintosh being billed as the most user-friendly computer. In 1983, John Sculley became the new CEO of Apple, as Jobs was considered too young and inexperienced. However, tensions ran high, as Jobs preferred doing things his own way, while Sculley wanted stricter oversight on products. In 1985, Jobs attempted to overthrow Sculley, but the board sided with Sculley, leaving a scorned Jobs to quit, and found Next, another computer company which he now had total control over. Following a tumultuous few years without Jobs, including the flop of product MessagePad, which did little more than take notes, Sculley was fired and Spindler took over to lesser success. Following his firing in 1996, Emilio took over to a wealth of problems. Seeing the ground underneath him disappearing, Emilio would eventually sign his own doom by buying Jobs' next computer and bringing him back to the company, where not much later Jobs staged another coup, this time seeing success in his plan. Emilio was outed and Jobs was CEO until his death in 2001. Under Jobs, the company flourished, releasing the most well-known product, the iPhone, in 2007, and as the rest they say is history. As stated in my hypothesis, purposeful change can be attributed to innovative technology and product development. Recent research asserts that newness, or product and process innovations, can serve as catalysts for shifts in interpretation, decision-making, and action steps. These new innovations generate non-mimetic responses, or what researchers Grieve and Taylor attribute to more purposeful change, rather than simple mimicry of past actions, hoping for the same effects as before. Grieve and Taylor's study demonstrates the importance of non-mimetic responses drawn out by innovation. Innovative activities are those which differ significantly from current or recent activities. As innovations likely present new problems, concepts, or relationships, organizations are forced to change, often in a purposeful way. Organizations who have established routines have little ambiguity and a known return on investment. Those, however, who create and develop new products and ideas have a less likely future, but one that centers more fully on the unknown, therefore providing more decision-making opportunities and alternative strategies. Grieve and Taylor's present a handful of hypotheses. However, for the sake of this project, I will focus only on one. Innovation will increase the rate of change in an organizational population. The study was performed by analyzing various radio markets and the impact of 4 innovative music formats: soft adult contemporary, soft urban contemporary, and new age. The innovation of these music genres led to more change, such as the adjustment of broadcasters and their vocal tones, or the length of song sweeps, which are uninterrupted song times. After studying the amount of innovations made during this period of time and their relative changes, through statistical analysis, it was deduced that the more innovations a company had, the more significant changes it experienced as well. Innovation was found to encourage change, as organizations often have to find new ways to compete and understand their audience's needs. However, the study does not explicitly state whether these changes led to success. Product development, in essence, is change, manipulating one product to be another based upon feedback or need. A second study, by Junjinger, attempts to explore whether product development can truly be a strategy used to surface and change fundamental assumptions. So, what is product development? Junjinger defines it as a set of activities beginning with the perceptions of a market opportunity and ending in the production, sale, and delivery of a product. She states that designers themselves continuously challenge people to change their perceptions and ways of thinking with the invention of new products. She also asserts that only recently have companies begun to realize the importance of the customer experience. Instead of focusing on optimization of processes and procedures, researchers should focus on the people they serve. With this assumption, Junjinger says that new revolutionary product development can help change the mindset and paradigms of a company, opening the door for smoother organizational change. By viewing products as intermediary acts rather than quote-unquote the end, companies can recognize their role in new radical approaches and provide them credit for future implemented changes. This human-centered way of designing products helps to facilitate that each product receives more complexities and involving more people than the one before. In this way, a snowball effect of change develops, creating new knowledge and new products. Although neither of these studies explicitly state that product development is a vehicle for organizational change and therefore a proven way for success, it can be surmised that as change is necessary for organizations, daily activities that can help to facilitate this process are beneficial. Apple's product development process is unique. A small team of designers are separated from the larger company. They have their own hierarchies, work schedules, and reporting structures, allowing them to focus solely on the design process. Every Monday, ideas are reviewed. Only a select few of potentially fruitful ideas are focused on, allowing resources to be strategically concentrated rather than distributed to many lesser projects. After a product is settled upon, it is manufactured. However, the design is iterated throughout this process, tested, reviewed, and improved upon, taking 4 to 6 weeks for each chain cycle. This process ensures that the product is of high quality. Following the product's completion, plans are set for its launch, known as rules of the road. This step details the responsibilities and actions that are taken prior to its public release. All of these steps help to assist organizational change. Stated in Junjinger's study, Apple based 3 of its most successful products on one that never made it to market. This allowed the company to develop insights and information in addition to technical competencies regarding what changes needed to be enacted in order to move forward successfully. In addition to product development as a way to benefit and stimulate organizational change, company culture also impacts how employees react and manage change initiatives. According to Cotter and Heskett, an adaptive culture is most beneficial for successful change. Some qualities of an adaptive culture include willingness to make changes, emphasis on identifying problems before they occur, and quickly implementing workable solutions, and a focus on innovation. In addition to the focus on innovation, which supports my hypothesis and the previously mentioned studies, let's take a closer look at how organizational culture can impact a company's desire to change and how Apple's culture supports these theories. A study by Rashid, Sambasivan, and Raman hypothesized that there was a correlation between organizational culture and attitudes towards organizational change. To perform this study, 258 employees registered with the Federation of Malaysian Manufacturers Directory were surveyed. First, the organizational culture was analyzed. Using a 5-point interval scale where 1 indicated strongly agree and 5 indicated strongly disagree, Employees were asked to answer questions related to Goffey and Jones' cultural typology indicator, which focused on two dimensions, sociability and solidarity. Take a look at this graphic for more specific information. Scores from these surveys indicated what type of culture an organization possessed, again, based on Goffey and Jones' 1998 study. Next, employee attitudes regarding organizational change was measured, focusing on three subscales: cognitive, affective, and behavioral tendencies. Following the data analysis, it was found that 46.9% of the companies possessed a mercenary culture, one in which strategy and winning is emphasized. The smallest cultural subgroup found was communal culture, one in which the business is dynamic and complex and both solidarity and sociability are emphasized. The results indicated that the majority of employees who were listed in a mercenary culture also possess strongly positive attitudes towards organizational change. As this culture promotes dedication to the organization's mission and goals and quick responses to changes in the environment, employees are far more likely to be open-minded of change, demonstrated by the 78.5% who responded positively. 79% of employees in a network culture also reacted positively to organizational change. These employees emphasize high sociability and low solidarity, the opposite of mercenary culture. Relationships are prioritized, and there is less emphasis on meeting the company's goals. Surprisingly, cultures where exaggerated concern for consensus was apparent, such as communal, which has high sociability and solidarity scores, employees were far less tolerant of change, indicated by the only 57% of employees who indicated positive attitudes toward change. The author suggests that because a mercenary culture thrives on winning, employees must adapt in order to ensure their survival. This type of culture is most appropriate in rapidly changing business environments that require quick and decisive actions. So, how does this affect Apple? It is clear from the previous study that Apple would benefit from a mercenary culture. However, researchers Burke, as well as Chapman, Caldwell, O'Reilly, and Dorr, state that an adaptive culture is one that better facilitates organizational change and is most effective in driving financial success. What do these two cultures have in common? Both place a high emphasis on the success of the company. However, mercenary culture disregards sociability and teamwork, choosing more of a dog-eat-dog attitude, whereas an adaptive culture works to ensure that there is trust between employees. It is my opinion that Apple has an adaptive culture. However, it should take caution to ensure that employees' needs are continuously heard in order to ensure its longevity. Beginning under Steve Jobs' rule, Apple's culture of adaptability has allowed it to have great success, most dominantly an innovative culture in which teams are able to collaborate, experiment, and take risks. This has allowed Apple to rise to the top in terms of its unique products and ideas. A study by Tellis, Prabhu, and Chandy found that this type of culture, one which balances both flexibility and control to be innovative, were more likely to succeed. Steve Jobs himself set this tone with the invention of the iPhone, removing buttons, what was considered commonplace in most phones of the time. Jobs also makes sure that each product the company produced had an A team. This allowed the team to focus exclusively on the sole product, using all of their brainpower for innovation and experimentation. This also allowed teams to be open to change. Jobs was known for saying, "Say no to 1,000 things." Although this might seem harsh, it prompted employees to quickly shift gears between projects if an idea did not work out. If something wasn't working, instead of struggling to conform the idea into fruition, they would scrap it and come up with something entirely new. Burke references shared feelings of confidence as an important characteristic of adaptive culture. Secrecy is necessary to minimize intellectual theft, and it allows Apple an edge on its competitors. However, the limited rapport among workers, credited to the secrecy rules, can limit employee relationships. Justin Maxwell, an Apple user interface designer, joked that, like the classic movie Fight Club, the first rule of Apple is you don't talk about Apple. Maxwell stated that at Apple, you are part of something much bigger than yourself, and that keeping company secrets is part of the job. Additionally, as Steve Jobs was known for randomly challenging employees to ensure their capabilities for working at Apple were up to par, combativeness was formed within the culture. Current CEO Tim Cook has worked to change this combativeness to competitiveness, ensuring that employees are challenged appropriately and only to build their own capabilities. These feelings of competitiveness can help to foster an adaptive culture, promoting employee willingness to take risks. As organizational change often leads to unknown futures, so too does taking risks, ensuring that employees already have a mindset accustomed to the unknown and possible feelings of uncertainty. Apple's corporate culture leads to the final factor which has made it successful: transformational leadership. Beginning with Steve Jobs and continuing today with current CEO Tim Cook, transformational leadership has always been a designation attributed to those in charge at this powerful company. So what is transformational leadership, and what makes it work so well with organizational change? There is overwhelming evidence supporting leadership and organizational performance. Therefore, it is safe to say that this leadership also affects change, even with far fewer sources to cite. Beginning with Burns in 1978, two forms of leadership emerged: transformational and transactional. According to Bass, transformational is characterized by charismatic leaders, inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, and individual consideration. In contrast, transactional leadership consists of contingent reward or pay for your performance, management by exception, and monitoring of deviances from the standard, mistakes, and errors. Transformational leadership styles are far more effective for promoting organizational change. Let's take a look at a study which supports this hypothesis. In an interesting study, researchers Steinwart and Ziegler analyzed Steve Jobs as a transformational leader, stating that he did indeed possess three key personal characteristics associated with the transformational leaders: creativity, passion, and vision. However, he lacks empowerment and interaction, two important characteristics that could have improved his leadership style. The researchers analyzed the impact of the missing two characteristics along with those that he did possess and surmise the effects it had on his overall leadership style. Steinwart and Ziegler begin the study by describing common characteristics of a transformational leader. They include high expectations for followers, a passionate articulation of their vision for the future, and stimulation of their followers' interests by infusing work with meaning. Transformational leaders work to recognize the value of their employees, relationships, and networks by providing them beneficial tools and resources. Next, to perform the study, Steinwart and Ziegler undertook a systematic search of dialogue regarding Jobs at the time of his death. Keywords such as Steve Jobs, legacy, death, and leadership were included, using a collection of 38 article databases to find the most relevant articles about the CEO. Ultimately, 26 articles were used to assess his leadership style, focusing on transformational leadership qualities. From these sources, keywords were searched in order to find the most common. The word count found that the top two words were innovation and creation, appearing 30, 32, and 25 times respectively. Following this analysis, they searched specifically for the 5 characteristics of transformational leaders as identified by Hackman and Johnson. They then compared the two studies. The results indicated that the top 3 words as related to transformational leadership and Jobs were creative, visionary, and passionate. However, 2 of Hackman and Johnson's transformational traits were missing: empowering and interactive. Steinwart and Ziegler state that although he possessed 3 of the 5 characteristics, the missing 2 hindered his full impact as a leader. From their searches, it also appeared as though Jobs was somewhat of a polarizing figure, with employees either describing him as enlightened or rude. However, one characteristic of transformational leadership, charisma, seems evident from Steinwart and Ziegler's studies. Findings indicated that Jobs was persuasive, making reality malleable in order to convince employees to perform certain tasks. In contrast, these high expectations were not tangential with employee engagements, again illustrating the lack of interaction he had with those around him. Overall, Steinmart and Ziegler's study demonstrates that although Steve Jobs did indeed possess many of the transformational leadership characteristics, incorporation of those he was lacking could strengthen his leadership skills even more. As the previous study focused specifically on Jobs, it is fairly clear what the implications are for Apple. True transformational leaders are able to easily elicit change, as the word transformational is related to change itself. As organizational change requires many things from employees, not limited to buy-in, commitment, perseverance, and dedication, transformational leaders are much more adept at eliciting these characteristics than transactional ones. As evidenced from the previous study, Jobs and future CEO should be sure to focus on the people aspect of transformational leadership, inspiring employees not only through a strong vision, but through their actions and personal interactions. It is important to ask, does Jobs' extremely high levels of vision, creativity, and passion make up for a dearth in his inactivity and lack of empowerment? I assert no, however, it does not completely doom the leadership style either. Implementation of these qualities could help to propel Apple to even greater success. A study by Saros, Cooper, and Santora provides final evidence that innovation, adaptive culture, and transformational leadership are all components of organizational change, components which Apple has successfully implemented in order to remain a driving force in today's technology industry. The study found that transformational leadership, and more specifically, those leaders who elicit a clear vision of success, create a culture of change that facilitates the utilization of innovation. With an ever-growing array of competitors, Apple must take steps to ensure that it remains a leader through the implementation of purposeful change. Although not without its flaws, Apple has set the precedent for technology companies: high expectations, openness to innovation, unique product development, encouragement of change, and strong leadership. Truly, the permanence and impact of technology is evident everywhere we look. Apple has made its presence known worldwide, with 1,397,960,000 iPhones to date sold globally. Organizations who refuse to acquiesce to change are likely to become irrelevant, as evidenced by companies such as Kodak and Blockbuster. As organizational change is complex with consideration to multiple factors, such as leaders, culture, and available resources, Apple should continue to monitor both internal and external change to ensure positive outcomes. I would recommend that Apple continue to develop its research and development sector, focusing on consumer needs so as to foster a human-centered product development strategy. The development of technology will help Apple continue to remain at the forefront of the competition and also foster new and innovative ideas, ensuring that all employees within the company have buy-in for change and understand how and why they must contribute. Secondly, Apple must ensure that its culture balances sociability and solidarity. Although possessing components of all four Goffey and Jones cultural dimensions, it leans more towards a mercenary culture, in which success is emphasized and informal relationships fall to the wayside. Although as demonstrated by Rashid, Samba Sivan, and Raman, this type of culture is most open to organizational change, it should be cautious that it does not ignore employee concerns. CEO Tim Cook is attempting to provide more balance between work and fun, as Steve Jobs was highly focused on sole company performance. Overall, Apple will continue to succeed should it promote a culture of change through the aforementioned qualities.